What we do with our non-billable time is far more important because that determines our future. And if we're not investing in our people, our firm, our clients, we're being awfully short-sighted.
You're listening to the Legal Mastermind Podcast with your hosts Ryan Klein and Chase Williams, the go-to podcast for learning from the experts in the legal community about effective ways to grow and manage your law firm.
Hey, you've got Chase and Ryan here with the Legal Mastermind Podcast. I'm here with John Remsen Jr. of the Remsen Group. Good morning, John. How are you?
I am doing well. Good morning, Chase. Good morning, Ryan.
Hey, how are you? We know you're on the East Coast, so we just barely creeped into the afternoon for you. Welcome.
Welcome. Well, it's good to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
So we're super excited to speak with you today. We know you've worked with over 400 lawyers as the president of the Remsen Group. Can we start off and just tell our audience a little bit about what the Remsen Group does?
Well, sure. We do consulting work mostly with smaller and mid-sized law firms on a variety of issues involving the business side of running the firm. Strategic planning is something we do a lot of. I think every firm, regardless of size, practice mix, should have a firm-wide strategy that kind of sets forth where we're taking the ship and what we're doing to get there. And we find about 40% of smaller mid-sized law firms have such a firm-wide plan in place. And within that plan, we're often working on governance models, succession, marketing and business development, associate training and mentoring, these sorts of initiatives that I think firms need to be paying attention to if they're going to survive and prosper in these changing times. And then beyond that, I run something called the Managing Partner Forum, which strives to create a community for managing partners of smaller and mid-sized law firms, as well as a collection of resources where they can hopefully be more effective in a very challenging and often ill-defined role.
Thanks, John. Thanks for the introduction. So to preface, we did have the pleasure of speaking last week for, I think, close to 45 minutes, and the amount of topics that we started going over there were quite a few, so it was a little bit difficult to narrow it down to maybe like one cohesive topic because we can obviously talk about so many different things.
Well, I thought we had it all figured out last week.
Well, we do now. So we're gonna go into it, and one topic I think that we'll really enjoy speaking with you about, and our listeners especially. I think that we want to focus in, and not strictly the entire podcast, but definitely for a bit, we want to touch on growing young lawyers to become an integral part of a law firm for not just, a year and then they burn out, or 2 years and they jump ship, but really developing them to a team or part of a team that lasts, with the firm for a long time.
Well, young lawyers are the future of the firm if the firm's going to be around in 10, 15, 20 years. And what young lawyers are looking for today is far different than what young lawyers were looking for 30, 40 years ago. Times have changed. And if firms are evolving and adapting to accommodate the career goals and aspirations of their younger lawyers, they shouldn't be too surprised if they have a bit of a attrition problem. And so I think hiring the right people and then investing and engaging them so they want to stick around a while and hopefully become an equity partner one day.
When we were speaking, can you imagine that you're a young lawyer? Of course, the scenario is almost always the same. You went through law school, you passed the bar, you're gung-ho, you want to work 1 million hours a week, you want to prove yourself. And that's understandable for a lot of young lawyers. It's probably not everyone, but from where we're standing, it does happen quite a bit. But maybe, nowadays, because of turnover and attrition, it is important for law firms to establish a concept of work-life balance. So what does that kind of look like for you, and how do you, when you work with lawyers and law firms, encourage them to kind of see the big picture when it comes to that?
Well, that's a great question. And the body of research on what young lawyers are looking for in their careers puts work-life balance top of the list. And that's very, very vexing to the senior lawyers who didn't have much work-life balance when they were young lawyers. But if we want to attract and retain tomorrow's lawyers, we have to recognize that that's an important career priority, that work-life balance. And so I think it starts by creating the expectations we have of our young lawyers in terms of their billable contributions and their non-billable contributions. That's how we traditionally measure an associate's contribution, is by their hours. And most often firms are focused on those billable hours. We did a survey managing partners, mid-sized law firms in April, and that minimum billable hour expectation seems to hover around 1,800, 1,850 hours per year. And that's a reduction from what we saw 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where I think the bar was set closer to 2,000 hours billable per year. So firms are starting to adjust that expectation, but I think it needs to be very clear and it needs to be consistent from firm leadership. If we've got one partner suggesting that, 1,800 hours, yeah, that's what they say, but it's really not good enough, that kind of undermines the messaging we bring to our young lawyers as a firm. So I think clear expectations, consistent messaging from the partners as to what those expectations are. So let's start there. What are we tracking? What are we measuring? How are we rewarding it? Are all things to distill around and be clear about as owners of the law firm.
You mentioned just like that the 1,800 hours. We had a conversation recently in the podcast where we were sort of talking about that work-life balance, and somebody's mentioning, hey, I got an email from my lawyer at 2:00 in the morning. And just really thinking about it from a quality perspective, like if that lawyer is so stressed out and working so much, what kind of quality of work are they providing at 2 a.m.? So there is that flip side to like overworking and working a 100-hour work week, more focused on having the quality work hours and having a work-life balance.
I would agree. I don't think you can sustain peak performance if you're expected to bill 2,100 hours, 150 hours a month, year in, or that's more than that. It's 175 hours a month in, month out. You just can't sustain that.
Yeah.
And, you have some questions here talking about mental health and, stress and being balanced in your lifestyle and working in hobbies and exercise and good eating habits. This stuff's important to our overall well-being. And I think younger people in general, younger lawyers are recognizing that and looking. And if we're not evolving and providing that, we're losing people.
So when we were talking originally, I love the concept of saying, we're so focused on these billable hours. You're mentioning 1,800, 1,850. And, we're in a position where law firms can, completely throw out the traditions that they had in the past and may not be working nowadays. Can you tell me what the significance of non-billable is?
Significance of non-billable is incredible. And if your listeners haven't run into a guy named David Maister, Maister, he's an author. He's a Harvard professional services management guru, and he has a great book called True Professionalism. And he talks about billable hours. That's important for today's income. But Maister would argue, and I agree completely, what we do with our non-billable time is far more important because that determines our future. And if we're not investing in our people, our firm, our clients, we're being awfully short-sighted. So that speaks to the business development. It speaks to leadership development. It speaks to pro bono. It speaks to mentoring and training young lawyers. It speaks to engaging as a leader of the firm and running a practice group or managing a branch office. There's far more to running a successful law firm than today's billable hours. And what we do with our non-billable time is really, really important. And in many firms, we don't measure it, we don't track it, and we have a hard time wondering why this non-billable stuff doesn't get done. And I think, people generally will give what is they perceive as measured, valued, rewarded. And if all we're looking at are your billable hours, that's all we talk about when we sit down and evaluate your performance. That's all that's included in the monthly reports we distribute. That's what we're going to get. We have found, again, through our surveys that about 1/3 of firms do not track non-billable time, doesn't matter for squat. About 1/3 of firms will say they track the non-billable time and it does matter. And about 1/3 of firms will say, yeah, we track it, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter much when we look at your compensation and your promotability. So I think creating the expectation that non-billable contributions do matter, legitimate non-billable contributions. And I think this is where a lot of firms are reluctant to measure and reward non-billable. What's legitimate non-billable time and what's not? You know, going to the grocery store really shouldn't count. But it's amazing what some lawyers will slot into that non-billable category if nobody's watching. The ABA, the American Bar Association, published a study not long ago, and it put forth a recommended model diet for associate attorneys. This is the ABA talking, not Remsen or any consultant type. This is the ABA, and it contemplates 2,300 hours all in, 1,900 billable, and it breaks down that non-billable contribution to marketing and business development, service to firm, service to profession, pro bono, and CLE credit. What we do with our non-billable time is important. It should matter, and I think it should be weighed more heavily than billable contributions, if you want my honest opinion.
That's interesting. Yeah, just real quick about the ABA. I'm not surprised at all they're putting out documentation like that. A couple podcasts ago, we spoke with a lady about mental health for 30 minutes straight, and ABA put out, I think it was about 70 or 75 pages of documentation solely on the mental health of young lawyers. So
yes.
If we're talking about niche ABA content for that, I'm sure they cover absolutely anything you can think of. Or if they're not, they're probably working on it.
Yes, and in addition, the ABA partnered with Hanley Hazleton, the substance abuse people, and did a survey about substance abuse, depression, anxiety within law firms, among lawyers, and the numbers are disturbing. And this is self-reported information, so it's probably a little low, but it puts upwards of 20-25% of lawyers will admit to a substance abuse issue, anxiety, depression. This is a high stress profession. And I think that mental health component is really, really important. You can't be running full steam ahead every day, day in, day out. It's just not good for you. It's not good for the firm. But trying to balance the stress and the pressures of being a good young lawyer versus a well-rounded human being, it's not easy. But more and more firms are bringing in wellness programs and trying to assist lawyers with the stress and with some of these mental health issues.
What are some ways do you think young lawyers can really focus on mental health?
Boy, that's a good question, and it's all the stuff mom told you since you were a little kid. You know, eat right, go out, get some exercise, get a hobby, find meaning and purpose beyond just work to your life. The diet and exercise piece cannot be understated, and working that into your lifestyle and making these things priorities. I'm good friends with a guy named Larry Richard, and Larry has done psychological assessments of thousands of lawyers over decades. And lawyers have very strong personalities, sense of urgency, very, very high. And I'm up there on the sense of urgency charts. And Larry's recommendation as he was going through my results with me was, John, you know, your sense of urgency is off the charts. You're going to kill yourself. You're going to have a heart attack if you don't settle down and take a deep breath and take it easy from time to time. And his advice was try yoga. So, you know, I try to live that as well and be sensitive to this stuff.
Did you stick to the yoga?
I tried it, and then to be honest with you, I have not. But I try to get out and play some golf, get out. I love getting in the yard, digging around, and just doing these sorts of things. I'm a runner. I've run all my life, and that for me is a great release of stress and pressure. And Yeah, you get busy and it's easy to blow off that trip to the gym or blow off that 3-mile run. But, you feel so much better after you've done it. And I think it's important that young lawyers do pay attention to their mental health.
That's funny. You're saying golf is a stress reliever. It's probably one of the most stressful things I can probably do with my free time.
Well, have a couple of cocktails, chill out.
Oh, that's more like it. Now I see where you're going with that.
Speaking of substance abuse, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, everything in moderation, hopefully. So as far as young lawyers, we're talking about mental health. We're talking about, billable hours and committing, your time and all your energy and really probably going into this, your first job as a lawyer, expecting to have a really lopsided work-life balance. And do you think that with young lawyers that they think that they're prepared for a career in a law firm because they went to law school consumed their whole lives for 3 years, then they did the bar, and bar pass rates, they're not insane, but they're not, not everyone passes. So, these lawyers are doing all these huge accomplishments that already consumed a lot of time, a lot of energy. They're really already, they're already used to committing all this time and stress. So why is it that when they're getting their first job at a law firm that they're still not prepared for that?
Well, I think that's because all we hear about are the billable hours, the billable hours, the billable hours. And that's the way it was 40 years ago when it was a male-dominated profession and a lot of stay-at-home wives and a lot of workaholics in there, not spending a whole lot of time with their kids and their families, and live to regret that. But I think many younger lawyers do have a much better perspective on the work-life balance situation. But I hear you. You're coming out of law school. You want to impress your new firm, and you want to really hit it hard. I advise young lawyers to pick the right firm and pick a firm that does, in fact, value your lifestyle and your career goals and priorities. And more firms, if you look at Baker Donaldson's website, for example, they have a whole section on recruiting and what they're doing for young lawyers and why you should come work for us. And it doesn't talk about billable hours much. It talks about the massage person that comes on campus on Friday afternoons. It talks about group space. It talks about flex time. It talks about investment in your leadership, in your business development, and a collaborative work environment. That's what they say on their website. I'm not sure they deliver the goods, but what more and more firms are making this a part of their recruiting. I have another client in Florida, a little firm, about 40 lawyers, and the firm is Blaylock Walters, BW, and they've created this Be Well initiative, playing off the BW, Be Well. And it looks at, your psychological health, it looks at your financial health, your social health, your physical health. And they're putting offerings out there to help their lawyers and support staff. Let's not forget about the support staff. They're important pieces of our firm as well, and they're under some stress. So they put this Be Well program out there, and the firm leaders will say, John, much to our surprise, this has helped us with recruiting, retention. People are really getting into this, and happy people are more productive people. Happy people are loyal. Happy people will stick around and appreciate what you're doing for them. So, that speaks to, that 2:00 in the morning email. I want people fresh and charged and well balanced. And so I advise young lawyers, look for those type of firms. Most big law firms won't give you that. They're grinding out the hours at big law. And it's interesting, there's a lot of articles out there in recent months talking about the litigation boutiques, the smaller boutique firms that are picking up big law refugees who've decided, all right, I'm done paying off a good chunk of my student loan, and I'm ready to trade off the big bucks that I'm getting at big law for work-life balance and reduced compensation, and I'm willing to make that trade-off. And many smaller and mid-sized firms are picking up on that, and picking up those big law refugees who do want a different lifestyle, a different set of career goals and objectives than big law's providing for them.
John, what do you think about the concept of law firms that don't track billable hours at all?
Well, boy, they're few and far between. This survey I mentioned that we do every other year of mid-law, these are managing partners weighing in, 167 law firms, and we asked what the minimum billable hour expectation was of your associates. No, not one person said 0. So it's very unusual to find a firm that doesn't track non-billable time, but I kind of like it. But you have to measure people's performance and contribution along some metrics. And for most professional services firms, it's the billable hour. That's how we measure what you're bringing to us. You're punching a clock. But maybe we measure their performance based on partner satisfaction. What about client satisfaction? What about number of matters completed, assignments completed? What about dollars as opposed to hours? But I think we have to have some sort of metric, some sort of benchmark against which to measure associate performance. If we're not going to use billable hours, what are we going to use? Partner satisfaction ain't a bad concept.
Yeah, I've never even heard that concept.
Some firms are starting to develop, emotional IQs, cultural indexes, and we do our this managing partner conference I mentioned to you every year, and I can't believe how many people left that conference putting employment satisfaction surveys in place, making sure their people are happy and productive and loyal, and trying to get good, valid information that yeah, we've got a good, loyal, happy set of lawyers and support staff. And a lot of managing partners picking up on that, the wellness of our people.
It's really interesting that something that seems like as concrete as billable hours can eventually evolve, like everything else, into other metrics that are easily quantifiable and maybe be more meaningful in the long run.
Arguably, yes. But we all know lawyers, law firms, they don't like innovation and new stuff and doing things differently. And the billable hour has been king for many, many, many decades. But with all, value propositions and alternative fee arrangements, I think we're starting to see the billable hour de-emphasized a bit among certain firms and arguably among more enlightened firms who are assessing their people's performance beyond just the hours they put on the books. It is quality of those hours. And, I don't think all people should be measured on the same barometer either. Some people are better marketers than others. Some people are better mentors than others. And, everybody's expected to bill time. Well, some people bring other contributions more valuable than just grinding out billable hours. I often get the question, at what point does the role of managing partner become a full-time role? So how are we finding ways to measure and reward those contributions?
Talking about things that aren't always traditional, do you think that it's also moving away from, incentivizing them just by compensation or bonuses? Are there some unique ways that law firms are now incentivizing lawyers when they're doing a great job, or they deserve recognition, that it's not just monetary?
Absolutely. And that my psychologist friend I referenced earlier, Larry Richard, will talk about monetary rewards. That's all important. We need to feed our families. But those psychological rewards, a well-timed public attaboy is extremely motivating to a young lawyer. Just want to call out that great job you did for ABC Corporation on that matter we just handled for them. You call out that young associate at the firm retreat or the monthly all attorney meeting and throw the accolades on that young lawyer. Oh my goodness, is that motivating? On the other hand, a public dress down when you've screwed up is not very motivating. And we all know lawyers, quick to criticize, a little light on the encouragement. And I think leaders should be more glasses half full, more aspirational, encouraging, willing to overlook mistakes. We all make mistakes. But attorneys, they tend to hone in on what's wrong with this picture. They hone in on the typo and tend to lose sight of the more optimistic, forward-thinking things that we should be focused on. So, it starts with a culture, and I think the culture of the firm is largely determined by the managing partner, firm leadership, and what the firm is willing to tolerate. And if we're willing to tolerate bad behavior, abusive behavior, we'll get that. If we're willing to tolerate chronic underperformance, we'll get that. If we're willing to tolerate young lawyers burning themselves out, we'll get that too. So culture, leadership, and it starts at the top.
Fantastic topic. Really appreciate your time going through these questions.
Well, thank you for inviting me to join you all, and I hope this has been helpful to you all and to your listeners.
And one last question, John. What's the best way for our listeners to get in contact with you if they will have any more questions or possibly might be interested in working with you?
Hey, I like that. Thanks for the setup.
Best question.
Our email is jremsen@theremsengroup.com. You can Google me. There's not that many Remsens out there, REMSEN, and you'll find me. We're based here in Atlanta, and our number is 404-885-9100. Not that anybody uses the telephone much anymore, but we still have one.
Thanks for listening to the Legal Mastermind podcast. If you're interested in working with Ryan and Chase, please email mastermind@marketmymarket.com. Make sure to join the free mastermind group for growing and managing your firm at lawfirmmastermind.com. Ryan Klein and Chase Williams are the managing partners at Market My Market, one of the top legal marketing companies in the United States.